Hello, I feel so grateful to have you here again. And it's my pleasure sharing this point of view after years of study. And I believe it can be useful for you, perhaps in a different way that it was for me in my own process um, of awakening and liberation. So I'm sharing this information with the purpose of uh, contributing to the conscious process toward inner freedom, and this is the ultimate purpose of mysticism or the mystic person, to create a direct connection with the source, whatever you call it. So I'm sharing the presentation here. Okay. And okay. With this, I'm starting saying that with that in mind, today we will attempt to analyze the human soul through the tree of life. And I'm referring to that pattern figure diagram that appears so fascinating and so and interestingly present more recently. Not only the tree of life, but also the flower of life, the seed of life, the Merkaba, or divine geometry in general. But I'm focusing today in the tree of life. And we will approach this analysis through the study of Hebrew Kabbalah because it's one of the most ancient sources with more development since the 12th century. And through Kabbalah is the way that I understand spirituality. However, I'm not talking about religion, but about mysticism. And I am aware that lately anything sounds Jewish is not very welcome because recent conflicts. And I have to say, because of that, I've been also questioning myself the purpose of that knowledge too. Even though, as we move forward in this video, we will we are going to realize that what really matters is the use we make of it. Therefore, in essence, Kabbalah addresses two great topics: the origin of the universe and the nature of the human soul, which is a huge study. And like I say, the most important opinion will always be your own and what you do with that way of thinking. Before going directly to the tree of life, I will try to explain the origin of the cosmos according to the teachings of great Kabbalistics like my teachers Javier Wolkoff and Javier Saban, who learned from other wise Kabbalistics too. And from that vision, the tree of life is a map or of the structure of the cosmos and the diagram of its development. Not only that, but also is a reflection of the human soul structure. This is related to a well known idea in Hermetism as above, so below. In other words, a correspondence, what occurs in the universe also occurs within us. And to continue, I want to develop a concept very difficult uh, to explain, and maybe impossible. So in the same way, it's very difficult to understand. And I am talking about the infinite, called in Kabbalah the Ein Sof. Through history, many. This is not an error in the presentation. I am trying to represent what is my idea of the infinite. And I was saying that throughout history, many have tried to explain or comprehend it. Kabbalistics, scientists, philosophers, channeling people, mediums, and gurus, many more people. But the reality is that there is no mental framework from human mind to truly understand it. Because this will require speaking about it infinitely without space and without time. And I think that doesn't make any sense. So if we cannot understand it, if we cannot understand the infinite directly, how can we know about it? And here I think is key because everything that exists in the universe is a manifestation of energy coming from the infinite. In other words, although we are not able to access to it directly, we can observe its effects in this physical reality. I'm sorry. Then, to better understand this, we can use a simple example. We all know that our physical and biological origin comes from a father and a mother. Even in artificial insemination cases, an origin is still necessary, or a source from which life emerges. Following this logic, the Kabbalistics perform an exercise of observation and they say, um, if we analyze what exists in this reality, we can infer where it comes from of, and what originated. So, although we cannot enter into the infinite or fully understand it, we can know something of its nature through what we perceive into this physical world. However, the infinite is not static or completely uniform. It has the ability to create a space within itself if it could step aside. In Kabbalah, this is called contraction or symptom. In physics, something similar is described as the Big Bang, although it is usually seen as an expansion. What really matters here is understanding that the infinite has the ability to make room for creation, and this creation is what allows the universe to exist. And since the infinite is infinite, it also has the capacity to create not just one universe, but many finite universes. What we call now the multiverse. So the infinite begins to manifest through a process of contraction. This first contraction is known in Kabbalah as the Simpson Aleph. Later, there was another contraction, which occur another contraction called the Simpson bet. Simpson bet, the second contraction. But this shows us that the infinite not only has the ability to expand, but also to limit itself in order to make space for holding something finite. In the first contraction, something fundamental appeared. A vacuum space like an empty vessel. And it's precisely in that space where two complementary forces arise, even though they might seem opposite, and I am talking about the desire to receive and the desire to give. At first, these two forces existed only as potential. When the space was created, the desire to receive appeared. As soon as the desire to receive existed, the desire to give was also activated. That space had to have a clear purpose. It was to receive. Without a place to receive, the infinite would have no way to give. And this is why creation exists, to allow the infinite to give endlessly. In Kabbalah, the desire to receive is called feminine energy, and the desire to give is called masculine energy. And I am not talking about gender, but about qualities or forces. This was where the first great conflict appeared. The desire to give was infinite, but the desire to receive was limited. The difference created an imbalance, and that imbalance led to chaos and destruction. This event is called in Kabbalah the shattering of the vessels. In science, again, is well known this event as the Big Bang. To understand that better, we can imagine an empty glass being filled with an infinite amount of oil, and that oil represents the energy of giving, which is expansive and limitless. The glass or the vessel was limited. Then there came a point where it can no longer contain that force and stop breaking and exploding. In a similar way, the initial universe could not contain the intensity of infinite energy or the infinite desire to receive, which caused a kind of explosion or expansion. As a result, the vessel fragmented into countless pieces. But the most important part is this: each fragmentation remained infused now with that infinite energy and the attributes of the vessel. In other words, within each of those sparks, both the desire to receive and the desire to give were present in all of them. In other words, even within that fragmentation, the highest energy of the infinite is still present in everything that exists. And there is another Kabbalistic interpretation of the shattering of the vessels, and that says that the vessel became aware that giving was better than receiving. So when it tried to give back, a strong resistance appeared, and this created a powerful explosion of energy. But as I mentioned, no one really knows for sure. After this moment of breaking, there was a second stage of the process, like I say, the Simpson bed or second contraction. But if before we saw an expansion of energy that created imbalance, now something different happened. The energy re-entered to the universe. I'm thinking what I want to say. I was saying that if before we saw an expansion of energy that created the imbalance, now something different happened, and the energy re-entered to the universe, but now in a more conscious and balanced way. And it's like a recreation of the initial process, but this time with learning. This time, the infinite force of giving didn't enter in an overwhelming way, but instead regulated in its own intensity. That means in lower frequencies. That's why I am representing here these lower frequencies and no a direct energy. And so, in this way, the vessel no longer break like it did before. And here's something very interesting happened. The vessel became aware. It no longer just received passively, but also began to expand in order to hold what received. In other words, it was not only about receiving, but also about active participation in the process. This is how balance between giving and receiving was created. Both forces began to integrate within the same dynamic, and they are no longer separated in conflict, but now coexist. I'm sorry, I'm drinking some water. So I was saying that they are not longer separate or are getting conflict, and they coexist now. Now, that's why in Kabbalah it's too simple to say that the feminine only receives and the masculine only gives, because actually both have a deeper role. The feminine energy doesn't just receive, but also holds and regulates the energy. And but this was only after the the shattering of the vessels, because they keep the attributes of the energy and of the vessel. And the masculine energy doesn't just give, but also helps expand the ability to receive. In other words, each force has two aspects: to give and to regulate, and to receive and to expand. And this point is very important at the most reform, because at the most refined level of creation, before vessels even exist, there is only energy, and this is gradually shaped. This energy it was gradually shaped, slowed down, and made easier to receive. This process of regulating and shaping the energy is what we call a feminine quality acting on a masculine energy. If we represent it in a simple way, we could say that there are two main moments in the creation. The first contraction, the Simpson Aleph, a direct clash between an infinite energy of giving unlimited capacity to receive, which causes the breaking, and the second contraction, or the Simpson bed, a re-entry of the energy, but now in a regulated, softer way, allowing balance to exist and to start the creation. This gradual and ordered process of energy entering is known as emanation, or absolute in Hebrew, or in the Kabbalah language. At this point, the energy no longer bursting but flows. It no longer destroys but builds. And this is where the possibility of a stable creation truly begins. From this process, we can better understand how creation was organized. First, there was a stage connected to the infinite, or the original thought of creation, which in Kabbalah is called the Adam Kadmon. And we can imagine it as a kind of cosmic blueprint or cosmic matrix, a level where all the information about the universe already exists, but only potentially. where there's no time, nor past or future, because everything exists at once in a state of pure potential. Then came the emanation, the absolute, the absolute. The, this is the world or the level where that information begins to flow. It is the light of energy that starts to move from the infinite toward the finite in a softer and more gradual way, not with the full intensity of the infinite. And at this stage, there is still not creation yet. It is a process of emanation, meaning the information is beginning to reveal itself. But only after this creation, I mean the world of Bria, here space and time begin to exist, and the energy is now reduced enough to take form. And at this level, what we call creation truly begins. So we can understand it in a simple like this. The Adam Kadmon is all the information already exists without time nor space. The world of Absolute is the information begins to be revealed in potential way. And the world of Bria is where the creation appears within space and time. At this point of Bria, the energy is no longer infinite, and it was at the origin, as it was at the origin, but has been filtered or reduced, which allows which allows it to be perceived and manifested. I know this process is could be very confusing, especially if this is your first time learning about it. Sometimes I get confused too, but I'm still learning. But this is natural. Even in science, there are ideas that are hard to fully understand. For example, the Big Bang begins from a state called as the singularity, something that cannot be completely explained. In the same way, those teachings uh, point to realize that no, I'm sorry. In the same way, these teachings point to realities that go beyond our comprehension. Now, let's continue with the world of Bria, because after this world, the world of formation appeared, called Yetzirah. This is not a separate universe from this is not a separate universe from Bria, but a process that takes place um, with the same world of Bria. In simple terms, it is how creation develops, how energy gradually becomes more defined and takes shape. This means the Yetzirah world is the stage where what was created in Bria begins to form. It includes everything that happens as the universe evolves, energy turning into matter, constant change, and ongoing process. In other words, this is the stage where energy begins to organize itself and take form. Now, within the process, the world of formation unfolds in six stages to finally arrive into the world of action or matter, which is known or called Asiya in Kabbalah. This is the physical world, the one we perceive, It is the final result of the work process. And if we add this, the three higher levels and the final level of manifestation, we get the structure of 10 dimensions, known in Kabbalah as Sephirot, which is the plural of Sephira. If we see it in a simple way in this chart, we have the worlds of creation or universe of creation. At the beginning, we have the Adam Kadmon, the primordial man, what is the matrix of the top of creation. Then we got the absolute, the world of absolute, where the energy begins to flow, Briam, where the creation in space and time, Yetzirah, the process of formation within creation, and physical manifestation. So the material world is not the beginning, but the end of the process. The moment when everything before it becomes completely invisible. These worlds represent different stages of transformation of energy. They can be imagined as levels descending from the most refined to the most concrete. And all of them come together in the map we know as the Tree of Life. This is where the Tree of Life is born. So far, I have explained the Tree of Life from a cosmic perspective, the development of the universe. But the most important is this, that the same levels also exist within us. Each level of the universe has a direct reflection in our soul. And that's the point I wanted to reach. Because in Kabbalah, everything is understood as soul and it's organized into different levels. These levels of the soul are connected of to the worlds of creation that I just mentioned. To start with, starting with the physical soul, nefesh, which is the soul of the matter, or the animal soul, or simply the physical body. This is related to the physical, the instinctive, and everything we can perceive through the senses and exist through chemical and biological functions. Going one level higher, we enter into the soul of the thoughts and emotions, which is called well, we cannot see the thoughts and emotion, but we know they are there. And this level is called ruach, translated as wind, but actually refers to the psychic soul. This is where our thoughts, emotions, and personality operate. And it is also the level most influenced by the environment, the family, culture, and society. This is why most psychological approaches work at this level. Above this level, we have the level of the soul called neshama, which is our true identity of the soul and our connection to the ability to create and manifest. It doesn't depend on our environment, family, or conditioning. It is who we truly are at our core. Sometimes people says that the soul is in the brain, but can be misleading because in Kabbalah is not something physical. The brain belongs to the material level, to the nefesh, but the neshama works through the brain, but is not the brain itself. It acts like those levels of reality. And that's why it's often seen like a mystery. This is how something so subtle can express itself in the physical world. It's said symbolically that when a person dies, the soul lives through the head. This represents the highest level of identity expressing itself. Now, here's something very important. When our thoughts and emotions, I mean the level of Ruah, is not aligned with our true essence, the neshama, an inner conflict appears. In simple terms, all our conditioning, physical, social, or cultural, can move us away from who we truly are. And it is often in that tension that the soul begins to awaken, revealing the neshama beyond those limitations. So, all of us who are seeking for freedom is because our true essence is rebelling against those conditioning setup. And above the neshama, there is still another level called Hayya. Hayya here. It can be understood as the energetic field that surrounds the individual. It is like an expansion of the soul, an extended, an expanded level that is not limited to the physical body. We can imagine it as a field that extends around us, forming a kind of space or presence beyond the body, often described as reaching about 2 meters outward. Now, if we want to connect these levels of the soul with their expression in the human body or its energetic centers, I could say that the most basic level of the soul, which is nefesh, is related to the physical body, but is associated with the gastrointestinal system as uh, energetic center, since it regulates essential functions for life, chemical and biological functions. In the way we transfer the energy of meals. If we move up to the next level, in Ruach, here, the level of thoughts and emotion is the energetic center can be related to the heart. And today we know the heart not only pumps blood, but also has its own neural system and generates an electromagnetic field even larger than the brain's. That's why the heart sometimes is described as another type of brain, more connected to emotions. Then we find the neshama, which is our true identity. Its expression is related to the brain into the head, but not as a physical organ itself, rather as a point where higher consciousness is expressed. This is like it rests on the brain, connecting the material with what comes from the superior levels, as and vice versa. Beyond this is the Hayam. The Hayam, the next level of the soul, which is not longer limited to the body, but is an energetic field that surrounds the individual and expansions of who we are. It's an energy what we belong, but can be also be expanded or contracted dependent of dependent on depending on our consciousness level. Sorry, I need water. So I was saying that, in other words, this level of soul is not fixed. I mean, the brain is not fixed to the soul is not fixed to the brain, but it opens or limits itself according to our ability to connect with soul of the matter, or with the soul of the matter, or superior levels from here. And finally, there is the Yehida, which is the level of unity. Here, we are not talking about individual energy, but about a connection with the wall. It is a stage where this, the sense of separation disappears and unity is experienced with other souls, with the environment, and with the infinite. We become to the source. At this level, individually, this dissolves. This is why it's not something we can access all the time. Rather, it's experienced in very specific or short moments. States of deep conscious connection, total clarity, or even in certain dreams states, or what many traditions call states of enlightenment. Now, if we want to connect all of this with what we saw before about the worlds of universe of creation, we can see a direct correspondence from Nefesh corresponds to Asya, the world of matter. Ruach corresponds to Yetzirah, the world of formation. Neshama corresponds to Briah, the worlds of creation. Hayah corresponds to Atzilut, the world of emanation, and Yehida corresponds to Adam Kadmon, the level of the infinite, or the source. This shows us something very deep, that each level of the soul vibrates at the same frequency as each of the worlds of creation. In other words, we don't just live in the universe, we are a direct expression of its very structure. Now, we fully enter in the tree of life, but no longer only as a map of the universe, but in a direct relation to the human soul. The tree of life we are studying in relation to the human. Oh, I'm sorry. The tree of life we are studying in relation to the human being exists at the level of Yetzirah, which is the world of formation. And that's why I said it is a reflection at this level. It mirrors a larger structure in a smaller scale. This means that above us, above the our tree, is the world of Bria, creation, and below is the world of Asya, the matter. From here, we have a double perception. When we go down, we perceive the matter, and when we go down, we connect with more refined levels for than creation. But our everyday experience happen in Yetzirah, here, in the world of thoughts and perception and emotions. Within this level appears the ten sephirot, which are like dimensions of forms of energy through which our soul is expressed. To understand them better, we can organize them in two ways: by columns of or types of energies, the right column, the left and central. In the right column is the energy of giving, the masculine force. Uh, then in the left column, the energy of receiving or feminine force. And the central column is a balance between both. It's important to understand that they are not completely separate. Even in the central column, there is an integration of both forces. We can also divide them into three groups or triads: the upper triad, the middle triad, and the lower triad. This helps us understand how consciousness is organized at different dimensions. Call each of them sephira. And each each sephira is a point where an exchange happens between an energy that gives and a vessel that receives. That's why each sephira represents a flow between giving and receiving, with the attributes I mentioned at the beginning. And well, let's begin to talk about the Sephiroth with the clauses of our experience. I'm talking about Malhut, which means kingdom. Malhut belongs to the world of Asya, the matter. But we interact with the matter only according to our perception of physicality. And here is a very important key. Malhut is not about how much you have. It's about how you involve with what you have. For example, a person who has very little but is at peace and satisfied is in balance in this dimension of malhut. But a person with a lot, but who feels unsatisfied is in imbalance. It is not about quantity, but about awareness. Awareness. Being imbalanced in malhut doesn't mean settling, but being at peace with what you already have today, while you continue to grow. In other words, you can want more, grow, or and move forward, but happiness doesn't depend on it. When you are okay with what you have, but is still evolving from a place of fullness, then you are imbalanced in malhut, balance. Something very important to understand about the tree of life is that each dimension or sephira can be experienced ex- in balance because in excess or in lack. In other words, imbalance doesn't come only from having too much, but also from having nothing. For example, here in Malhut, there is imbalance if you are obsessed with the material, and here we could be slaves of materialism. But also, if you completely reject the material world, that's why both the materialistic and the extreme spiritualist are imbalanced in this dimension. Now we move up the next level. I'm sorry, more water for me. I was in that. Now we are going to move to the next level within the lower triad to the Sephirah of Yesod, which means the foundation or connection. Here we find the ego, sexuality, and social relationships. In simple terms, it is the image you project to others. Imbalances here can be from lack, isolating yourself, not wanting to see anyone else, or feeling superior or disconnected. And from excess, constantly surrounding yourself with people because you want to avoid facing yourself. The balance is being able to relate to others without losing yourself. And then we have hot, the humility or communication. This dimension is related to the use of the words. Here, the issue is not just speaking well or badly. The real imbalance is speaking without awareness, and that includes gossip, lies, defamation, manipulation of information, or unnecessary or harmful use of language. The balance in thought means using words with truth, clarity, and purpose. In the Sephirah of Netzach, which is called the victory or perseverance, this dimension is related to emotional expression, including art and expression. The imbalance here usually shows up overwhelming emotional reaction, anger, impulsiveness, or emotional outbursts. But the balance is about feeling the emotion without losing control. Now we pass to the middle triad here, and here we enter into a deeper level of the self. At the center we have no, I'm sorry. At the right we have Hesed, understood as love or mercy, but this is the love understood in a wide concept. Here is very important key: you cannot truly love others if you don't love yourself first. The imbalance are giving to others and forgetting yourself, the self abandonment, or loving only yourself and not considering others. In other words, selfishness. The balance is loving others from a healthy self love. And if we move to the left in the same triad, we, we are in the Sephirah of Geburah, which means the power, limits, and discipline. Here is the ability to set boundaries, saying no, and practice self control. Imbalance can appear as by excess, with rigidity, control, and authoritarian behavior, or by lack, not knowing how to say no, allowing others to cross your boundaries. The balance in NetSAP is using power with awareness, and saying no when needed is also an act of freedom. At the center, here we have Tiferet, which is called the balance or beauty. This is the center of the tree of life. Here, two forces are integrated: love, Hesed, and limits, Geburah, understood as desire. And from this union, inner balance is born. Tiferet represents the authentic self, the point where everything comes into harmony. It is the place where you stop reacting from extreme and begin to live with coherence. Now we enter to the most refined level in the tree, and this is the intellectual level in the upper triad here, right here. And the Sephirah of Binah, which is called the understanding or comprehension, here is the rational intelligence, analysis, organization, understanding, and understanding ideas. The imbalance appears when you become completely rational and you lose connection with intuition or dreams. When you only trust in the mind and disconnect from the spiritual world. So Vina is the dimension that organizes and gives structures to the seven dimensions we already saw, and is the one that brings order, classifies, and gives form to ideas. That's why one of the clearest imbalances in this dimension can be seen in people who want to control everything: the extreme perfectionists, the obsessive or anxious people, or even attitudes like overprotection. Here, too much order turns into rigidity. Now we move to the right column within the Sephirah of Chokhmah, which represents wisdom. Here we are talking about a different kind of knowledge. It's not a rational but intuitive. It is the world of intuition, dreams, deep perception, and the connection with the spiritual. Here we find people who are very sensitive to subtle things, such as those who channel, interpret dreams, or seek higher states of consciousness. But there is also an important risk here. When there is when there is an imbalance here, sorry, a person can become too detached from reality, can lose connection with what is concrete, not being able to ground the experiences, or feeling lost or confused. In extreme cases, this imbalance can show up as a complete disconnection from reality, what we know as madness. And this is why it's key understanding something. There can It's not possible to be wisdom without understanding. So when the intuition, and Bria, the reason, are balanced, a special dimension appears called Da'at, the knowledge. And when the knowledge is truly integrated, we is when we understand what you came here to, what you came here to do. You rise to the level of Keter here, which is also known as the state of fulfillment, where the happiness comes from the process and not from the result. To start the process infinitely over again. Now, let's briefly review how each sephira relates to the parts of the human body. In Malhut here, they are the feet, Yesod, the sexual organs, Hod and Nesach, the kidneys and legs. In Hesed and Geburah, the arms. Tiferet is the heart. Chokmah and Binah, the brain hemispheres, and Keter is related with the pineal gland. And this is where the tree of life begins to show something very deep. It's not about eliminating any dimension, it's about balancing all of them. Because each of its part, each one of because each one is part of who you are. I mean, each sephira is a part of a reflection of who you are. Well, this is a long introduction of the Tree of Life, but as a conclusion, I want to say the process that represents the Tree of Life did not happen only once at the beginning of the universe. It is a constant process that repeats itself all the time. And it's an infinite process that repeats every time we create something, an idea, an emotion, an action. We are repeating this same pattern of creation. So, based on everything we have explored so far, this has been a long introduction to the Tree of Life. And I have to say, I will be working with this from now, guiding souls in their own process to self-discovery, or remembering the greatness and power they truly have, or they truly are. And this process involves identifying in which of these dimensions there could be imbalances, and also working with Kabbalistic tools such as um, gematria, which is Kabbalistic numerology, archetypes, astrology, combined to biodecoding. And for those um, who want to go deeper, I am offering a free initial session where we can generally identify the traits and strengths of your soul by reading your personal tree of life. And if you choose going even further, we can later work specifically on the imbalances that shows up. And another important reason for sharing all of this through Kabbalistic astrology, I will continue using the Tree of Life in upcoming moon cycles, which can also be understood as cosmic portals. And this connect with the last talk about the full moon in the uh, and the beginning of the next new moon, which will be in the month of Taurus next Friday, April 17th. However, I will be sharing since Thursday 16th, so you can be aware and prepare one day before, only in case you want to follow the live stream like this. So I'll be aware of your comments and questions. And with this, I want to say um, thanks and love for you people.